This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. So in the last session, we discussed about the basic introduction about the Java. So today we are going to discuss about the data types. So in the last example, what we identified, we come up with the one data type called int, and we have identified how this particular string is going to work. Okay, so these are all the two different data types we identified. Along with these two data types here, we are going to discuss other data types here. So what are all the other data types we are having inside our Java language here? So as I explained here, so we have a primitive data types here. So the primitive data types are, it's convert like their category is four types here. So we'll try to identify what are all the four data types we are having, and inside this particular each category how many data types we are having. So we are going to identify it here. Okay, so let's understand the primitive data type. So this is very important here, because so in future we are going to discuss about the wrapper classes. The difference here, primitive data type and wrapper classes, we need to understand. Okay, so if we want to understand the differences between these two, first we need to know what exactly the primitive data types are going to contain here. Okay, and understand here the primitive data type here, as I explained, these are all the four categories. So what are all the four categories we are having? First one is integer. Getting the point? First one is integers, and the second one is we can call it as a floating. Okay, and the third one is we can call it as a characters. Okay, and last one we can call it as a boolean. Getting the point? So these are all the four categories. These are all the four categories. Inside the each category, again, we are having different data types here. So first one, so if I'm going to identify this particular integer category, what are all the data types we are having? First one call byte, and the second one call short, and the third one call int. Getting the point? And the fourth one, we are going to call it as a long. So these are all the four data types here. So inside this particular four data type here, we already identified the first data type called int in the last example. So basically what we need to understand here, these four data types here, these four data types are going to take as a numbers here. Getting the point? So these four data types we are going to store as a number values here. So this we need to understand here. But inside these four data types here, what is the difference between each one? So here we need to understand the range here. Getting the point? So we need to understand about the range. So what is the range of each particular data type? Like what is the range of this particular byte and short, as well as int and long? So we need to understand the range. So range is nothing but from which value to which value this particular data type is going to store. Okay, if I'm going to give more than the range, now what happens here? So this is we need to understand here. And we identified this four comes under the this particular integer category. And same way, inside this particular floating category, what are all the data types here? So we have a two data types here. The first one called float, and double here. Getting the point? So these are all the two data types here. These two data types comes under the which category? It is comes under the floating category. Right. So inside this particular floating category, what are all the values will load here? So as I explained here, this four category, like four data types will load the number data types, and same way, these two data types also will load the same number. But so this will try to load the decimal precisions here. So like it will try to load 12.06, getting the point, and 15.7, something like. So these are all the dot related value. Getting the point? So that dot related value is going to handle by this particular two data types here, float and double. And here we need to understand the range, because this is the smaller range compared to this particular double. And same way, byte is the smallest the range data type, and long is the highest range data type here. So this is the way we can differentiate the each data type here. And what about this particular character? So character contain only one data type, that is called char. This particular char will store only character related information, something like A, B, something like C, or you can store as a small A, B, C, something like. So these are all we'll call it as a characters. Getting the point? These are all we'll call it as a characters here. So these are all the characters are going to handle by the, this is the data type here. So the data type we are calling as a char. Getting the point? So this left side section is containing the data type, and this particular right side information is containing a category. Getting the point? So this is important. And what about this particular, the last data type here? Boolean. So Boolean contain only two data types here. So first one is true, or second one is false. So these are all the two values we are going to store. And what is the name of the data type here? That is, we'll call it as a Boolean. Getting the point? So this is the data type, and these are all the two values it's going to load. Only these two. So you cannot store numbers, you cannot store characters, or you cannot store any double related values. Only the Boolean data type will accept only these two values, true or false here. These are the two values here. Okay, so now we understand here the data types, how many data types we are having here. So basically inside the Java language we are having four categories here. So each category will contain the different data type here. Inside the integer category we are having four data types here, and inside this particular floating category we are having two data types here, and character category can contain only one data type called char, and the Boolean data type can contain one data type, that is called Boolean, and it accepts only true or false values. So other than these two values, if I'm trying to give something, the compiler will give an error here. Getting the point? So now you can count how many data types you are having. So four, and these are all the four. So around eight data types you are having. So inside the eight data type here, we identified only one data type, that is called int. In the last example, we identified this particular int here. Getting the point? So we'll try to identify each and every data type here, how it is going to work. And so first we need to understand the range here. First we need to understand the range. So first we'll understand the integer category related data types. So later we'll move on to the floating, and later we'll move on to the characters, and finally we'll move on to the Boolean. So let me clear the console and we'll try to come up with a range here. Okay, so now we'll understand the range. So what is the each data type can contain the range. So for example here, the range here, first we'll understand the byte. First we'll understand the range. The range here minus 128 to 127. Get in the pen. So this is the range. So we can store minus 128 to 127 here. Get in the pen. So for example, so this is the range. You can see here it is starting from the minus and it is starting from the plus. So you can see minus 128 to plus 127. So you can see this is the between the range, right? So these are all the range here. So up to here minus 128 we can provide, and here 127. Getting the point? So we can give you the 128 minus 128 to 127. This is the range. So between the range, so between this particular range only, we can store the values. So for example, if you are trying to give something like this, so this is the outside range. Now what happens internally? Getting the point? So this is not inside this particular range here. So this is the outside of this particular range. Whenever I'm trying to give this, so we'll see what happens internally, how this particular value is going to converted, how this particular value is going to fit into this particular byte data type here. Okay, so we'll understand here how this particular value is going to fit. So now we need to focus more onto the range. So this is the particular range. And what about this particular short here? Because short is the another data type which is comes under the integer category. Now if you see, so short is, it's going to contain little bit bigger compared to this particular byte here. Now you can see this value, this particular short will go into store. So 32 768, and from 32 768 to, so plus 32 767. Getting the point? So this is the range. So this value, it can easily fit into this particular data type, because we are going to store up to the 32,000. So between this particular 32,000, this is the 12,000 value. It can easily fit into this particular short data types. So there is no problem here. But only the problem here when we are trying to work with a byte data type. Okay, so we'll understand here how this particular value is going to converted here. But now observe carefully, the range is important here. So only the byte is going to take less value, only the byte is going to take less value compared to the other data type here. And what about this particular int? Now if we observe, this particular int is going to take little bit bigger value compared to this particular short. So now you can see the range here. So now we cannot imagine the what is the range of this particular int. So now you can see, so it's going to take 2147 comma 783 and 648. So now you can calculate this. So this is the bigger range. Getting the point? So this is the bigger range the int is going to store. So now you can see. So from this value to, so it's going to take something like 217 and 483 and 647. So this is the range. So this is the range is going to store by the int. And now you can imagine how the long is going to store. So we cannot provide the long because it is some bigger value. Getting the point? So this is the some range here. This is the range is going to take by the each data type here. Only the smallest range is going to handle by this particular byte. So other than this, we can come up with any data type here. We can store any value inside this particular short or int or long here. Okay, so these are all the range of this particular integer category data types here. Now we'll move on to the float data type. So float data type, how it is going to work. So before going to discuss about the this particular float data type here, we need to understand the simple example how this particular the each data type is going to work. So let me come up with a simple example. Okay, so let me we'll try to understand the one example on this particular integer data type, how it is going to work. Now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to converting into the Java style here, and I'm trying to create a one class. So what is the name of the class we can provide? So basically, I'm trying to come up with the light. So just I'm trying to find out the light speed here. So based on the days and milliseconds and seconds time. So what is the speed of this particular light here? So that's the basic example we are going to found. And now you can see the class I created. I come up with the main method. So because we already discussed here, without the main method, we cannot work any example here. Okay, so main method I created, and after this, now what I'm doing it, so I'm defining the int data type because we already identified the int is going to take some little bit bigger range compared to the short and the particular byte here. Okay, and now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to define the variable name. So this is the light speed. Getting the point. Now observe carefully how I'm trying to define the variable name very readable here. So this is very important here because whenever you're trying to develop any application here, the variable name it should readable. By seeing the name of the variable or the method or the class, we can easily understand what is the purpose of this particular method or variable or the class. Now by seeing this particular variable name, now what we are understanding is, so this particular variable can contain the light speed related information. Getting the point? So this is the way we can define the variable name. Now observe carefully, I'm coming with the long days here. Getting the point? Or what we can do, instead of defining this particular long days, we can go for the short here. So days we can give within the some short range only. We can come up with a short here. And now seconds here. So basically seconds we can provide as a long or we can provide as a int. Now I'm coming with the seconds here. So how many seconds we are going to provide? And finally, this is the long distance here because distance is going to calculate some mathematical algorithm. Based on that, we are going to find out the distance here. So between these particular days, if how many days I'm going to provide here, based on this particular days, this particular light it's going to travel with the help of how much speed here. Okay, that we are going to identify. Now observe, so approximately speed I'm giving here, light speed. So if you see, this is the speed I'm giving here, approximate speed I'm giving for second. Light speed, it's going to travel for second. This is the value. So 1,86,000 here. Okay, so just sample I'm giving here. It is not the like a exact value. Just for our current example understanding, I'm giving the value. Now, so we initialize the light speed. Now I'm trying to come up with the days. So I'm trying to find out in the 1,000 days. In the 1,000 days, the light will travel how many distances here. Okay, so here I'm trying to find out the second. So how we can find out the seconds here? So the seconds, the logic basically days multiply with 24. So 24, what is a 24? It's a 24 hours here, and so 60 minutes, something like 60 seconds here. So this is the some mathematics multiplication we are using it to find out the seconds. Getting the point? So I want to find out the seconds in this particular days. So 1,000 days, how many seconds we are going to get? Getting the point? Each day we are having 24 hours. In each hour we are having 60 minutes, and each minute we are having 60 seconds. So this is the simple logic we are using to find out the seconds. So now we can imagine the seconds, the what is the value we are going to get. So we cannot imagine the value little bit some bigger value, because so you can multiply these many values, we may get some bigger value. So now what is the data type we are using here? So I come up with the int here. So we'll see what is the value we are going to get for this particular second. And finally, now what I'm doing is I'm trying to find out the distance here. So I want to find out the light to distance here. So how I'm trying to find out? Now you can see, so this is the light speed, and I'm trying to multiply with seconds here. Getting the point? So this is the way we can find out the distance of this particular light here. And finally, system dot out dot print I'm using. I'm not using the println. So what is the difference between print and println? So print method will give you the current line, and the println method every time it will print on the next line. So this is only the differences between print and println here. Okay, so what is the message I'm trying to write in? So in this particular days, okay, in 1,000 days, so this particular light here, system dot out dot print I'm trying to write, and here in this particular 1,000 days, so light will so travel about. Okay, so this is the message I want to print. And after this, system dot out dot, so here I'm trying to defining println, and here so distance I'm trying to print, and here now what is the message I want to add? Something like miles. Okay, so this is the simple example. Now, so what we can do, we'll try to identify the seconds here. So to find out the seconds here, now what we can do, system dot out dot println seconds I'm trying to print. And the distance basically in the last line, the line number 14 we are printing. So this is, we need to understand here. So what is the value we are going to get? The value is going to fit into the appropriate data type or not. We need to check here. So light I'm trying to save. And here, so let me go to the where this particular so command line will available. Java C light dot Java. So something we are missing semicolon here. So here we miss the semicolon. So this is very important here. Now observe, if you miss something here, we are getting a compilation error. So this is the will give you the more practice here. If you try to practice the example using the notepad plus plus or any notepad, so you can easily understand here what we are missing here. Because if you are directly practice in our IDE while implementing the code only, IDE will give you an error. Getting the point. So this is only the differences between notepad and IDs here. So now you can see it's compiled successfully. And finally, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to run this particular example. So now you can imagine this is the seconds time. Getting the point. And now you can see, so this is the range of this particular value here. So these many miles this particular light is going to travel in our 1000 days here. Getting the point. So this is a way we can imagine so which data type is suitable and what is an example we are going to write, or what is an application we are defining. So we need to check the range first. So based on the range, we can define the variables here. So for example, instead of long here, now if I'm going to define short, getting the point, if I'm going to define the short, so now observe carefully, Java C. Now you can see what happening internally. So we are getting an error. So now, so try to understand this error, incompatible types. So what is the incompatible types here? Basically from into to short. Now what I'm doing here, so whatever the result we are getting, so light speed multiply with second, what is the result we are getting? Basically the result basically we are getting as an int here. So if you observe this, so from into to short, so what is the short data type we are defining? The data type we define for the distance. Getting the point. And now what I'm doing is, so the result we are getting as an int, and the int value we are trying to converting into this particular short. Int value we are trying to converting into this particular short. So when we are trying to converting here, we are getting an error here. Getting the point. So we are getting an error here. Why? Basically, compiler, if you're trying to return something, the output is going to take as a int value, not the byte value. So by default, the result compiler will understand this is the int value. So now what I'm doing is, this entire the result the compiler is converting as a int, and this int we are trying to converting into short, because short is the smallest data type compared to this particular int. So when we are trying to converting from bigger data type to smaller data type here, we need to use the typecasting here. Okay. So line number 12. So basically this is the print statement here. See, to understand this print here, I will try to open the ID one more time so that you will understand here what exactly the differences we are going to have inside the print and println. Okay, so now understand here. So I will explain regarding this particular line number 12. So before going to explain that, so here where we are getting an error, here the line number 11 we are getting an error. Now how we can resolve this particular error here? So we can resolve this error using this particular typecasting here. So now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to converting the result into this particular short. So now you can see what happening here. So again we are getting an error. Again the same, even though if I'm trying to use here, so the still the seconds here, what is the seconds we are having here? Seconds int. Okay, so let me see this. Instead of doing this, what we can do, here we can provide the into result. Okay, and so this result distance is equals to short result. So I'm trying to converting into data type into short here. So now you can see it is converted happily. Now what is the result, the final result we are going to get, that is important here. So now you can see 16384. So observe carefully, here we are getting this is the some bigger value, but here we are getting some small value. Why? Getting the point? Because this is the outside of this particular short range here. So this particular value is not going to fit into this particular short data type. Now what happens internally? So basically it will convert the, it will try to perform the like division operation. Whatever the reminder we are going to get, the reminder value only is going to store into this particular short data type. So we'll see. So this kind of simple example here, whenever we are trying to converting bigger data type into smaller data type here, what happens internally? Okay, the smaller data type value, it can easily fit into the bigger data type, but only the problem here, the bigger data type value, it cannot fit into the smaller data type here. To fit the smaller data type here, we need to like compiler will convert the value based on the division operators here. Okay, so those example we can see once we completed the data types here. But observe carefully, now we need to understand here, whenever I'm trying to use the long data type, this is the value I'm getting, and whenever I'm trying to use the short data type here, this is the value I'm getting here. So what is the basically the correct output here? So this is the correct output here. So okay, but what we need to understand here, so we need to think here, so which data type is suitable, and what kind of the application we are developing, and what kind of the like program or example we are trying to developing, that is important. Based on that, we need to define the data types here. Okay, so someone asking about the line number 13. So if you see the print method, now here what I'm doing here, I'm trying to move into the same, where is that system class. So this is the system class we are having, and now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to open the print method. Uh, so this is the print method. Now if you observe carefully, print method, these many print method we are having. Now what we are doing here, so directly we are writing write method, like so internally we are calling write method with help of this particular string dot value of c. Okay, so carefully observe, this is the print method. Now whenever I'm trying to open, whenever I'm trying to open println, observe carefully, again I'm trying to open the println. Now if you see, so what we are doing here, we are calling one extra method. Getting the point? We are calling one more method here, that is called new line. Getting the point? So if you see inside this particular print method, we don't have any new line. We don't have any new line. Only we are having inside the println. Whenever we are calling the println, so we are calling the one more method, that is called new line. Now what you understand here? So print and println. So print method will print the value on the same line. The println method, every time it will look for the next line. Why it is looking for the next line? Because of we are calling internally one more method here. Getting the point? So this method is going to call from the only println, not from the print. Getting the point? So is it clear? So still you are having any doubt on the print and println? Okay. So now back to here. So this is all about the simple example on the data types here. So this data types we use it for the only integer category. Now we'll move on to the floating category. So to understand this particular floating category, how we can write the simple example. So before going to write this particular floating example, now first what we need to understand here, we need to understand the range here. So you can see the range is little bit bigger value. So like what we identified inside this particular byte data type. Okay, let me explain the print and println. So basically, how we can explain, let me write the one more line here, system dot out dot print method I'm trying to write here. So this is print method. Okay, so now So if you see here, I'm adding println. Okay, so observe carefully. This is the first one is printing, like print method. Second one is println method. Now what I will do, I will compile this example and I will run. Compile this and execute here. So if you observe carefully, now what happening internally? This is the print, and again this is the println method we are calling. So these two are printing on the same line. These two are printing on the same line, right? Now observe carefully. So here system.out.println. I'm not writing any code. I'm not defining anything inside this particular println. So now observe, again I'm trying to compile and executing. So what is the difference we are identifying here? So this method is printing on the same line, and whenever I'm adding extra println, why it is moving on to the next line? Getting the point? If you see, so even though if I'm calling the println, it should print here, it should print here. Now you can see, so we are getting some space here. Getting the point? So you can see this is the space we are getting. Why? Because of the println we are calling. So this println, what is doing here? It's moving on to the next line. Instead of printing on the same line, now what happening internally? It's taking care of the next line. So it will print on the next line here. Whatever the message we define, the message is going to print on the next line. So this is only the differences we can easily understand here. So if I'm not adding the println here, it's printing on the same line, and if we come up with a println method, it's moving on to the next line here. Okay, so still any questions? Just simple understanding here. Whenever we are trying to use the println, every time the output is going to print on the next line. So next line is nothing but here. If you print something here, it will not print here. So this println, like println method is not going to print after the whatever the current println method is used here. So it will move on to the next line. So every time it will move on to the next line here. Okay. So to understand one more, so we'll move on to the sample one. Here I'm using the print. Okay. The if sample I'm going to use here. So observe carefully. Java C if sample.java if sample. Now if you see what happening internally, all the values are printing on the same line. Getting the point? All the values are printing on the same line here. Why it is printing on the only the same line? So a value 0. Now you can see, so after 0, again the b value 20. So again a value 1, b value 18. But what we identified in the last example, so see the difference here. So if I'm trying to use println, so if I'm trying to use this particular println, now we'll compile the same output one more time. Now see the differences. What happening now? So instead of printing on the current line, so it's printing on the each value on the next line. Each value on the next line. So this is the differences between the print and println here. So only the difference, print will on the current line, same line the values will print, and the println each time will move on to the next line. So this is only the differences here. Okay, still anyone having any question? Okay, now we'll move on to the this particular float related example. So observe carefully how we can write, how we can come up with this particular float related. So to understand this particular float related here, so we need to understand the range. So range basically the float, whatever the two data types we are having, float and double, so these are also having so bigger range only, but we cannot write like this. So basically this cannot contain minus 12,320 something like this. So it's going to store some bigger value, like how the int and long is going to store same way. This is also some bigger value. So range is not matter, but only the difference with what we need to understand between these two data types here. Float will end up with the f. Okay, double is not going to add any d. So this is we need to understand the differences here when we are trying to work with the float and double. So for example, float data type I'm defining, f is equals to something like 14.01 f. 14.01 f we need to define. What about this particular double here? The double d is equals to, getting the point, double d is equals to, here we are going to write 14.01. We are not going to come up with any d. We are not going to come up with any d. So if you write the d also will not happen anything here, but compiler will ignore this particular d. But if you specify this particular f, if only the compiler will understand this is the flow to data type value. This is the float data type value. So otherwise it will treat it as a, again it is the double data type here. So this is only the differences between these two data type here. Okay, now what we can understand the range. So range, so this is the range here. One dot. So float range here. Now you can see one dot e. So this is the bigger range value. So 3.4. So now you can see, so we cannot contain the, like we cannot count the ranges. So what exactly the range will contain. So it is, we can understand this is the some bigger range value. So it's going to store this. Same way we have double also. Double is some bigger data type value compared to this particular float. And now you can see 4.9 E2. So here we are having something like, so it's going to take something like 7.8. So this is the some bigger range. So ignore this range here, because whatever the value we are going to give, it will accept here. But only what we need to understand here, if we want to use the float data type, so we should end up with the f. If we want to use any double data type here, we don't want to write any d. We don't want to write any d. This is only the main differences between float and double. So let's understand the simple example. So how this example is going to work. So to understand this, we'll try to come up with some area related example. So how we can write area, let me move on to the one more. Java class I'm trying to take as a area. The class name of the class I'm trying to take as a area. Public static void string args I'm defining. And here, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to define. So D, E. So here I'm trying to define as a pi. So R I'm trying to define, and here. So these are all the three variables I'm defining. Getting the point? These are all the three variables. So if we observe, if we want to find out the area, now what we will do? So we'll try to write the mathematical logic here. So something like pi r square. How we are going to write the pi r square? So pi into r. This will give you the area of this particular circle. Getting the point? So area of this particular circle here. Now we are going to write the same example here. So observe carefully. I'm defining these three variable as a double data type here. Right. Now I'm going to initialize the value. So what is the pi value we are having? So I'm giving the approximate value. So 1416. So this is, we already identified the pi value. And now I want to provide the R value. So what is the R value I'm giving? So basically this is the radius of this particular circle. So one radius I'm trying to give some any value. Just I want to find out the circle, the area of this particular circle. Okay, this is the R value. And now what I'm trying to find out area. A is equals to, so here I'm going to write pi into R into R. So this will give you the area of this particular circle. But these two variables are having what data type here? Double data type. So now you can see each value having dot value between the original value 10.8, so 3 dot. So this, so when we are trying to use the dot related information, we can go for the this particular double here. And finally, system dot. So now what we need to understand here, area of this circle is. Okay, let me save this example and so we don't have Java C area.java. It's compiled successfully. Area. So we are getting the output here something like 366 dot 436,224. Getting the point. So this is a way we can find out the this particular area. So if I want to use float, now what happens internally? Here only the difference here, we can go for this particular output like this. We should add end with a F here. So now if I'm going to compile, now you can see what happens internally. So whatever the output we are getting same, getting the point, because the last character is not adding here. So it's going to eliminate it based on the data type here. But observe the same output we are getting. So 366 dot 43622. But only the difference what we need to understand here. So we should end up with this particular F when we are trying to use the float. And whenever we are not using the float, we can eliminate this particular F. So this is indicating about the particular float data type here. Any questions?
Sir, I have a question. In the previous example, when we were trying to calculate the distance, the value has changed. But here, the value did not change. So why is that?
Yes. Basically, range is important because double lined float, it's going to have some similar range. So like it like basically does not have the range differences between these two data types, but we have a differences here. Light the sorry long is going to store some bigger value and short will store some smaller value. Because of that, the output is not fit into this particular short data type. But here whatever the output we are getting, the it's happily it's can fit into the so flow data type, because the range it the whatever the output we are getting, the output is between the range of this particular two data type, double and float. But here the range is out. So whatever the range, like whatever the output we are getting, the output it is out of this particular short data type range. So instead of like whenever we are the output is outside of this particular range, we need to do some division operation. Whatever the remainder we are going to get, the remainder is going to fit into the short data type here.
Okay, thank you. Sir, one question. Can you show the area example in either short or long, please?
So basically, so if we want to find out this, we need to remove this. Basically, the integer related data type will work on only these three
Okay,
and do
okay.
10 well.
Yeah,
So
I
whatever
got it.
the dot, okay,
Yeah, thank you.
okay. Any other questions?
Sir, I have also a question. Sir, can you please explain the plus or because we did not mention the all these things in area of circle is, but what plus sign um tells us?
Okay. So basically, now what we are doing here, the println is expecting the different data types. So if you understand this, so this is the println method. How many println we are having? We have around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, around 10 methods. Okay, so inside this particular 10 method, if you observe carefully, is expecting the primitive data type. Now you can see is expecting boolean, char, int, long, float. Okay, but now what we are doing here, we are trying to defining two data types here. Getting the point? If you see here, this is one data type. This we are treating as a string, and this we are this we are treating as a float. Getting the point? But here the println cannot hold the two data types here. It can hold only one data type here. So either we can pass as a string or we can pass as a float. But our output, basically I'm trying to print the output to understandable, like it's a readable format. So either what we can do, so we can close this, we can close and we can print this output like this. Here now what we can do, here I can print here. But what happens here, whenever I'm trying to print this, let me compile. So now you can see this is printing in the different line number and this is printing on the different line number. So these are the two different outputs here. But what I'm expecting here, along with this particular message, I want to print the whatever the output we are printing. So in that case, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to appending here. So whenever we are trying to appending, we should use this particular plus symbol. So using the plus symbol only, we can combine the two data types here. What are the two data types we are combining? First one is string and the second one is float. Okay, the combine is going to take care of this particular plus operator.
Okay, sir.
Okay,
Hmm.
so this is, we'll discuss more on the string related example, because in the string we are going to work on the different concatenation related example here. So basically just for understanding I'm writing, otherwise we can come up with two println statements here. Okay, now we'll move on to the characters. So this is the different category we are having. Now we'll understand the simple category example. Basically this particular category, now what happens internally, it's going to come up with a unicode system. So if you have some basic understanding of ASCII value, so based on this particular ASCII value, it's going to find out the value. So simple example of understand here how it is going to work. So here I'm going to come out with a, I'm trying to comment out this. So basically, this is also important here. This is the multi-line comments here. If you see here, I'm starting with a slash with star, and here I'm trying to end with a star and a slash. So this section, what happens internally, compiler will ignore this particular code. Compiler is not going to compile this particular code. Getting the point? So this is, we'll call it as a multi-line comment here. And if you want to comment here, so this is the single line comment. So basically in Java, if you try to comment out something, the commented code is not going to compile here. Getting the point? So this is also very important. So why, like in the which scenario we are going to use this particular comments? So comments basically, whenever we are trying to write the class, or when you are trying to define the method, or whenever you are trying to write some logic, so this logic to understand by everyone, we can write some message here. So on top of the method or on top of the class, we can come up with a comment, either the single line or multi-line. We can write the comment so that by reading the comment, we can easily understand the purpose of the particular method or the class. Okay. Now this is also important, the comment section. Now understand the character related. So as I explained here, the character category contain only one data type, that is called char. And inside this particular char, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to define the two variable. So ch1 comma ch2. These are all the two variables I'm trying to declare. So once we declare these two variable, now what I'm doing is I'm trying to initializing. So ch1 is equals to, I'm trying to initializing as a 88. So basically 88 is a number value. So the number value we can store into the integer related data type, but still here what we are doing is we are trying to store into the char. Okay, and another data type here, so ch2. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to come up with a y. So y is a character. Okay, why, how I'm trying to define it with a single quotes. So this is very important here. So single quotes we can come up with the characters, and if you define the double quotes, that will treat it as a string. Now you can see here we come up with the double quotes. So this is we are treating as a string. And what about this? This we are treating as a character. So character will come up with the single quotes, and we need to define only one character at a time. Now if you see, so the ch1 and ch2 we define as a char data type, but the char is holding integer values as well as character values here. So we'll understand here what is the difference we are going to get. So system dot out dot print I'm trying to define here, and this print here, so ch1 and ch2. Okay, so I'm trying to define as a string message, and after this system dot out dot, so println I'm trying to define, and inside this particular println again I come up with a ch1. So I'm giving plus, and why I'm giving this particular place here, because I want to print so two values here, so ch1 and ch2. In the pen ch1 and ch2. So first we'll print this particular example. We'll see what is an output we are going to get here. And now compile this. So something we miss a semicolon. Okay, and now compile this. So it's compiled successfully, and I'm executing. But if we observe carefully, ch1 and ch2, what are the values we are getting? X comma y. Where this x is coming? Because y we defined in our example, okay, the same y we are printing. What about this particular x here? Because we did not define the x here. So if you observe carefully, we define this particular 88, but whenever we are defining this particular 88 internally, what is an output we are getting? The 88 value we are getting as an x. Why we are getting an x here? Basically we need to understand here ASCII value. So the character data type, it will try to look up the ASCII values. So for example, so I want to move on to the ASCII table here. Which one, whether we can load this. Okay. So if you see this, where the capital X is defined, you can see. So what is the value of this particular capital X here? What is the value of capital X we are getting? 88. So I given the 88, the output we are getting as a X here. So now if you see, I will give you this particular 102, we are going to get as a small f, small f. Now if you see 102, again compile this and execute. Now you can see small f and capital Y. Getting the point. Now what we need to understand, basically we need to understand here the character data type will work on the based on the ASCII table values. So whatever the value we are going to provide, and it will try to look up this particular ASCII table value, and it will return the appropriate character. So otherwise, if we want to come up with the characters directly, we can use like this. So with the help of this particular single quotes, we can define the whatever the character here. Okay, so any questions?
Sir, if we give a value that is not in the ASCII table, then it will simply show an error.
No, it will not give you any error. It will convert into the int. Basically, char data type into data type are without typecasting explicitly, it's converted happily.
Okay.
So it will not going to give any error.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and we need to understand the range here. So the range basically, so we can give you the 0 to so around 65, 536 here. So this is the range is going to store inside this particular char data type here. So either we can give you the ASCII value, or we can come up with a, so up to the, this is the range here. So between this particular range, how many value we want to give, we can give you. So it's not going to give any error directly. It will print to the value. Okay, can you explain line number 13? So line number 13. So basically here we are not doing any much code here. Just we are printing the values. So what is the value is holding by CH1 and what is the value we are holding by CH2. So between this, now what I'm doing is just I'm giving the space between these two particular variables. I'm giving the space. If I'm not giving the space, what happens internally? Let me explain this. Basically, so this space we are not going to get here. The highlighted one we are not going to get. What happens here? We cannot read the value. So if I'm not adding this particular space, so if it is a, the output we are going to get as a fi. Okay, so it will treat as a some word here, but the character cannot store the word. It will store only single characters here. So in that case, I given as a simple space here. Uh, Please explain one more example for char. Okay, so one more example. Let me see the one more example. I'm trying to comment out this. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to come up with a multi-line comment here. Again, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to come up with the same char related example here. So observe how we can define this particular char. So what we can do, we'll try to come up with the same. We'll define here. So again, the ch1 and ch2 we are going to use. And now what I'm doing here, so ch1 is equals to, at this time, I'm going to add as a small a, and ch2 is equals to, I'm going to give as a 65. Okay, so now you can see one number I'm giving and one character I'm giving. So what I will do, again, I'm going to print these two here. So here we can give you the space, and here we can give you the some space here. Basically, just for understanding, I'm giving the spaces. Okay, now save this, compile one more time, and execute. Now you can see ch1 and ch2. What is the value we are getting? So the small a we given, but what about this particular 65? 65 is holding capital A. Inside the ASCII, the 65 is holding capital A here. So this is we need to understand here. Okay. Now what I'm doing here, so the vapor classes related example we can discuss later. Okay, so we'll come up with the one more example so that we'll get to know how this particular carry is going to work. Basically, internally, so characters are going to use ASCII value. If the ASCII value is not available, it will try to print the something like different value. So now you can see if I'm going to give, instead of this particular 65, I'm come up with a int num here. Getting the point? So 65, I'm giving as a num here. Now what I'm doing here, this particular number, I'm trying to converting into the char. So if you see the output, how I'm trying to converting. Okay, so this is explicitly I'm converting into the char. So if you see what is the 65 we are having, so again we are going to get the same output called capital A. So it is compiled successfully. Now you can see it is printing A. But now what happens here, if I'm not adding this, so if I'm not adding the particular type conversion, so observe carefully. Again, I'm trying to compile, and now you can see. So what is the value we are getting? 65. And earlier, what is an output we are getting? Capital A. Why? Because we converted into the char data type. So when we are trying to converting into the char data type, what happens internally? So it will try to look up the ASCII value. It will return the ASCII value. Okay, now, so 65, something like 6545 I'm giving. Now, here again, I'm going to use the char. Okay, whatever the number we are having, I'm trying to converting into this particular same char data type. So compile. Now it's compiled successfully. Now, what is the value we are getting? So still it is a question mark. Getting the point. So inside the ASCII, the 6545, what is the value? Yes, 6545 what we given, it's converting into the character data type, and it will look up the particular ASCII value that is called question mark. The question mark is printing. Okay, so this is a way we can convert into the char to int and into to char. So same way, if observe carefully this particular ch1. Now what I'm doing here, so I will remove this, and here I will come up with a int here. Sorry, here I will come up with a int. Now whatever the ch1 basically is a char data type. Now what I'm doing here, we are trying to converting into the int data type here. Now you can see 97. Basically earlier what is an output we are getting? Yeah, now we are getting 97 because from the character we are converting into the int data type here. So it's not giving any error here. So we converted char to int and int to char. So without getting any error, happily the values are converting into the, so the both sides here, like char and int. So still anyone having any question?
I have one question, sir.
Okay.
So we are converting from character to integer. So can we use float and double also in the same method?
Okay. See here. Float I'm trying to converting. Let me clear, compile and execute. What happens here? 97.0. Getting the point. So it's converted or not?
Yes, it did.
So only we need to think about the range. If it is within the range, we can happily converting here.
Got it.
Okay. Now we'll move on to the, so the last data type called Boolean data type here. Now observe carefully. So what I'm doing here. And before going to discuss about the Boolean data type here, now, so what I'm trying to understand one more example. Let me comment out this. And here I'm having, so ch1 basically I'm trying to give as a capital X. Okay, capital X I'm giving. And now what I will do here, I'm going to print the capital X value. System dot out dot println, and simply, so I'm going to add as a ch1. I'm not writing any string related message. And after this, now what I'm doing is I'm trying to increasing the value. So this section as of now we did not discuss here, but imagine here, so just we are increasing the value. So basically the values we can increase on top of the numbers data type here, but character we given here. Getting the point? If we observe, so just we given the character, how we can increase the character? Getting the point? This is important here. So we can increase the number, but we cannot increase the character. But what I'm doing here, so I'm trying to use the operator called increment operator. So what it will do, basically, for example, if the x value, what is the x value we given earlier? Something like 88, right? Yeah, I think the x value, if it is 88, this particular 88, if you give, if you use the increment, now it will become 89 here. But here we given the character. So what happens internally, we need to understand here. Again, after the increment, the same value I'm printing, the same ch1 I'm printing. So now observe carefully this output here. Okay, first one it is printing as a x, and the second one is printing as a y. Why? how it is printing, because so characters we cannot increase, only the difference like what we need to understand here. So character will not increment here, but the character contain the what is the ASCII value, the ASCII value is going to increment here. So for example, the X is having the ASCII value something like 88, so the 88 will become 89 again. So it will look up the what is the 89 ASCII value. So whatever the 89 ASCII value we are having, the 89 ASCII value will print on the line number 22, and the initially, so whatever the ASCII value of this particular 88 and what is the character we are having X, it is printing here. So this is important, we need to understand. Even though we are using the char data type here, we are able to happily increment the value and decrement the value. So if you see, so here we can decrement the values also. So ch minus minus, ch minus minus. So let me compile and execute here. So now you can see X and W we are getting here. Getting the point? So we are getting the two values. Earlier we come up with the xy, now we are getting xw here. So this is a way we can increment and we can decrement the value. So because of the particular, the ASCII values are going to use internally this particular char data type here. This is the important example we discussed right now. And now I'm moving into the final data type called booleans here. So boolean data type, as I explained here, it can hold only two values. So let me come up with a simple example. Class I'm trying to use, and here, so I want to use the bool test, and here, so and now what I'm doing here, so this is the primitive data type called boolean. I'm trying to define the variable name called b. Okay, so just I declare the variable name. Now you can see the line number 4. Now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to initializing the value. What is the value I'm trying to initializing? That is called false here. So after initializing this particular false here, system dot out dot println, system dot out dot println here, and now you can see b is, so I'm trying to print this particular b value, and after this, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to initialize one more value. Okay, now how this particular value is going to override, we need to understand here. So initially we come up with the false, and later I override with the true. So now what happens here, if I'm trying to override with something like 1 to 3 or 1 to 5, bool test. Now I save this example. I will go to the compile and bool test.java. Now you can see we are getting an error. Now you can see int cannot converted into the boolean. Getting the point? Int cannot convert to boolean. So basically what happening internally, whatever the integer value we given, we are trying to converting into this particular boolean here. So this particular conversion, it's not going to work in our Java. So basically boolean data type will hold only these two values. First one is false, second one is true. And now observe carefully, here I come up with the one condition, because this section we discussed in the last example, like if this particular b is true, now what we can do, so the statement we can write, so simple understanding, println. Now what I'm trying to write here, so this is executed, some message, this is executed, and now compile this. Now we are not getting any error. So now what you understand here, whatever the boolean data type we used here, the variables we can happily use into this particular conditions, like if condition, because the what is the syntax we are using, so whatever the expression we are writing inside this particular condition, if condition, whatever the expression we are going to write, if the expression returns to true, so this line is going to execute, otherwise it will return, like it will come out of the line number 8. Now what is the b value we're having right now? B value true, because initially it is a false. Whenever the line number 6 is executed, it will become true. the false is going to override with the true. Now let me run this example. Java, sorry, bool test. So B is false initially, and the second line B is returning true, and the last one, this statement is executed or this is executed. Getting the point. So this is also applicable. We can use the Boolean information inside this particular condition. So instead of coming with the expression, so earlier how we come up with the expression, something like x less than y or x greater than y. The entire expressions, if it is returns true, the statement is executed. But right now, I'm not using any expression. Directly, I'm using the Boolean because this is important. Because most of the time, what happens internally, so the expressions here, for example, here, so x less than y. So what happens internally? This x less than y will return the Boolean value, not the integer value. Getting the point? So something like int xy. We cannot use the int xy. So what we can use here, basically, we can go for this particular Boolean here. Boolean xy is applicable because here, so just we are checking the, it is an expression. Getting the point? X less than y, whether the x value is a smaller value compared to the y or not. If it is really smaller value to the y, it will return true. Otherwise, it will return false here. So the xy will hold only true comma false here. So this is also applicable, or directly we can go for this particular b. Okay. So any questions regarding this particular Boolean data type here? Okay. So if you don't have anything, now we need to understand the variable declaration. So basically, we define the variable declarations in the earlier example onwards here, but observe carefully what I'm doing here. And here I'm trying to come up with a multiple variable declarations. So a comma b comma c. So we are declaring like this. Now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to initializing the value. So if you observe carefully, into d is equals to 3. So the d value I'm initializing and e comma f. So f value I'm trying and initializing. And what is the value we are not initializing? The e value just we are declaring. And what about the d and f? The d and f we are trying to initializing the value. So this is also applicable here. Along with the declarations, and we can initialize the value, and along with the initialization section, one more variable we can come up with declaring here. So this is also applicable here. So these two cases it will work successfully. Either directly we can define the declaration section, or so one variable, if we want to use the same value for the all the location, like it's like a d value is the common. Now what we can do, we can declare the, like we can initialize the d value, and the same d value we are going to use multiple location. So right now we are not going to understand much of these declarations and initialization. So once we move into the class level information, we can easily understand here how this particular declarations and initializations is going to work. Okay. And this is the one more information I want to provide, and how we can dynamically initialize the value. So what is the best approach here? So dynamically initialization, we can come up with a command line arguments. So this is also best way to initialize the value from the command line. Dynamic is nothing but, so whatever the value we are thinking, we can give you the dynamic value. But here if you see in the previous example, so here pi value we come up with a 3.1416. We cannot modify this particular value. How many times I'm trying to run this example, so all the time the value will be same. All the times this value will be same. It's like a static value. So static value is nothing but, once we define the value is not going to modify. The value is not going to modify. But what is a dynamic value? Dynamic value is nothing but, this pi value, it needs to change based on our requirement here. So one time we can come up with a 3.14, and second time, so we may come up with a 6.14. Third time we can come up with a something 7.14 something. So something, some different value. So that we'll call it as a dynamic value. So how we can come up with a dynamic value? So let's observe the simple example I want to provide. The dynamic value something here. Okay, now you can see double data type I'm trying to use. and inside this particular double a value I'm trying to initializing as a dot 0, sorry 3.0, and b value, so I'm trying to initializing 4.0. Okay, a and b I initialize here, and now observe carefully double c we may come up. So this particular double c, now what I'm doing here, the c value I'm going to use dynamically. Okay, math dot here method we have. Okay, if you observe, math is the one class which is available inside our Java language, and I'm calling the one method called sqrt method, like the square method we are calling. And here now what I'm doing here, so a, sorry, a multiply a plus b multiply b. Okay, so based on this particular a and b, based on this particular a and b, I'm going to get dynamic value. This value I'm not initializing, so based on this particular method the value is going to return. Based on this particular method the value is going to return. So if we observe system dot out dot println, I want to print only this particular c. And now if I'm going to compile and execute, it's compiled successfully and I'm executing. So now you can see what is the C value we are getting 5.0. But how this 5.0 is coming? Based on this particular method calling here. Based on this particular method calling, internally it's returning the C value. Okay, the C value we are providing dynamically. It's not a static value. Okay, so if you see something like if I'm going to give 30, and now the value it's going to change. So now you can see something like 30.26549 some bigger value we are getting the point. So this is a way the C value we are getting as a dynamic value, because these two are the not same. 5.0 is a different value and 30 dot some 2 dot something is a different value. Okay, so this is, we will call it as a dynamic value. We'll see how we can come up with a dynamic value in our upcoming classes here. And another important things we need to understand, scope here. So this is the scope and lifetime of the variable. This is also very important here. So right now we come up with a different data types and variable declaration, my variable initialization we identified, and here we need to understand the scope here. So how exactly the scope is going to work? Class I'm defining. So we come up with the name of the class I'm defining as a scope, public static void. Okay, args. And here now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to defining one int x here. Okay, and the second line I'm trying to initializing the x value. So line number 3 we declare, and line number 4 we are initializing the value. And after this, now what I'm doing here, I'm checking the condition. If the x value equals to 10, getting the point. If this particular x value equals to 10, now what I'm doing is I come up with the one curly brace. Here I'm opening the brace here, and into y I'm defining into y is equals to 20. Getting the point. And after this, system dot out dot println I'm calling, and here, so what we can understand, x and y. So x and y I'm trying to print, and after this I will come up with a small x, and I will give you the space between these two variables, and finally I'm printing y. Okay, so this is the x and value we are printing, and after this now what I'm doing is I'm trying to multiply. So x is equals to y multiply 2. Now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to multiply the, like I want to change the x value with help of this particular y multiplication 2. And after this Now what I'm doing here, I'm going to close this particular curly brace, because how many lines we are using? 3 lines. Whenever we want to execute the 3 lines based on the some condition, now what we need to do, we need to come up with brackets here. So because this is the block of code we are going to call, this is, we'll call it as a block of code. This is not a single line. And now what I'm doing here, so outside of this particular block, now what I'm doing here, I want to initializing x equals x value as a 100. Getting the point? X value I'm providing as a 100. And finally, so system dot out dot println, system dot out dot println here. So this is, we need to understand here. Here x is, I want to use this particular x, and finally I'm closing these two, whatever the braces we opened here, and scope. And let me know whether this particular example will complete, like will compile successfully, or it's going to give any error. So what you're trying to think here, so try to think about this particular example and let me know whether if I'm going to compile this particular scope example, it's going to compile successfully or it's going to give any compilation error. Okay, so now understand here, I don't know, so most of the people are, I think they are in the dynamo, whether it will compile or it will give any error. So now java c scope.java. Now you can read this, cannot find the symbol. So which symbol it is cannot find here? The variable y in a class called scope. But y variable we already defined here. But even though if we define the variable y, so still we are getting an error. Why we are getting an error this? Any idea?
Because it's coming in if scope, not in class. Like we are taking in if curly braces. We need to take in class scope.
Mm, okay. Can you repeat again? I did not understand.
No, we are writing this int. We are initializing here with the in the if statements or if syntax, we can say, in this curly braces. So do we need to write here with the under the x?
Yes, basically we define the y variable, but this in the y variable within the block of this particular code. So this y variable available the lifetime of this particular y variable within this particular block only. Getting the point? So wherever we are declaring the variable information, so that is applicable within the particular block of code. If you are trying to access outside of this particular block of code, the compiler cannot understand where this particular variable is defined. Because if you see the line number 10, we are like we are initializing the y value. But if we want to initialize this particular y value, we should define inside this particular main method block. We need to define inside the main method block, but where we define inside this particular if conditional. So if we want to initialize the y value, like y is equals to 100, so this line will not give any error. The line number line, it's not going to give any error because we declare the variable y in the line number 6. So we can happily modify the value because we are inside this particular block of code. But whenever we are coming out of this particular block of code, the y, the compiler cannot understand here. So as I explained earlier, this section of code, this section of code from here to here, this will come under the stack memory. Getting the point? This will under the stack memory. Stack memory can contain the into x and y variable. But once it is line number 10 is executed, once the line number 10 is executed, this stack memory will not available. And same way, so once this particular line number 13 is executed, line number 13 is executed, main method stack memory. So this is basically if condition stack memory, right? And one more stack memory we are going to define, that is called main method. Main method stack memory. Here we can come up with x comma and y. This will not also available once this particular line number 13 is executed here. After line number 13, if you're trying to print something, or if you're trying to initializing, or if you're trying to defining, that is the different. But if you're trying to access what is the information available within this particular main method, so we cannot access here, because again this is the scope is outside of the scope. So whatever this, wherever we are trying to define the variable, first we need to check the scope, the scope within the particular block of code or not. If it is not, again the compiler will give you an error. So this is the simple example here. Getting the point? This is important here. And what about this particular lifetime here? The lifetime available within this particular block of code, if it is coming out of the if conditional block, we cannot access this particular y. If we want to access this particular y, what is the way to we can define? So this we can remove from the line number 6 and define outside of this particular if conditional. Okay, now you can see you can modify 100 or you can modify this particular 200, so nothing will happen here. So happily we can compile here. Now you can see it is compiling successfully. Getting the point? So this is the way we need to check about the lifetime variable information and scope here. So now you can see, so x and y we are getting as a 10 and 20, and outside of this particular if conditional block we are printing the x value, that is called 40. But if you see x, we are defining line number 4, and inside this particular conditional block, happily we are trying to modify the value. Happily we are trying to modify the value. If it is not there, if it is not defined this particular main method, if it is defined some other scope, again the line number 9 also will give an error here. The line number 9 also will give an error. So this is we need to understand about the scope information regarding the variable where we are trying to defining and where we are accessing. This is important here. Okay, now so we'll move on to the like casting information, like the typecasting here. So how we can come up with a typecasting incompatible types, like into 2 byte, into 2 char, or into 2 short, something like. So this type conversion we'll try to understand in our tomorrow session. So once we completed this particular type conversion, we'll move on to the arrays concepts here. So we have a different types of arrays we are going to discuss here. And first we'll understand the and what exactly the array contain, and what is the structure of this particular array it's going to create internally. We'll continue tomorrow. So any questions regarding our today's session? Anyone having? Okay. So if we don't have anything, we'll continue tomorrow.
Sir, can you share the recorded session in the group?
Yeah, sure. Just message me in the group. I will share.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.